Right, so it's really rainy outside, not fully equipped. I actually did practice. I even brought a camera, an umbrella for my camera, but I need to be even more equipped to handle recording outside today. So I really appreciate Zehi joining me in the.
Thanks for having me on your show again.
Thank you for being on my very tiny show. Yes, I appreciate it. So I'm just going to get on with it. How do we save the Earth the easy way? As a rough introduction, I mean, as the usual sort of introduction is, all my arguments are based in science, psychology, but inspired by Islam. These are fairly. Actually, I can't always say they're always simple, but fairly simple, but unusual. Um, I think it's be intriguing to know, let's say, an Islamic point of view that points out what's different about what I'm going to say as an introduction is that it talks about root causes rather than the surface things that most people talk about when they talk about environmental issues. Let's just get on with it. So, number one, fix consumer addiction. So, I will briefly mention verses of the Holy Quran I'm referring to just to prove that it is Islamic rather than just me talking. And I always provide kind of references in the links underneath the YouTube videos. So, fix consumer addiction is point one. And the verse of the Holy Quran is, and as to those who disbelieve, their deeds are like a mirage in the desert. So people might take offense at, oh, disbelievers, why are you saying them and us sort of thing. And the way I describe disbelievers, the way the Quran describes disbelievers in this scenario, how is that? Green tea. Pret review.
I mean, it's kind of a little bit tropical, but it's actually quite nice.
Okay. All right. We were a bit worried about it being tropical. So tell me if any point we could fix that. It's possible. But anyway, back to the environment. So just I don't want to because I'm trying to make it really short. I won't explain it too much. But the idea of disbelievers is kind of prefaced in the verses before. It describes people who are kind of hiding from the guidance or the light of God. Basically, right? So it's a choice and a very willing choice, basically. Anyway, and the result of that, and the light of God basically is the only thing that really fulfills. Okay, it's not just physical light, but it's kind of like gives meaning and direction and all sorts of all the good stuff that psychologists have already accepted that we need. So Viktor Frankl, I always mention him. Because I'm a very all I talk about is very simple stuff. So Viktor Frankl, a long time ago, he's kind of like the best top psychologist in the field of happiness. Let's say he said we need meaning for happiness, right? And so God is the fundamental linchpin of all of those things. And anyway, just to really go through it as fast as possible, the disbelievers, their deeds are like a mirage in the desert. The thirsty one thinks it to be water until when he comes up to it, he finds it to be nothing, and he finds Allah, that is God. Everybody's God, by the way, who then fully pays him his account. That means basically you're chasing a mirage, and a mirage is a brilliant description of materialism because it's an illusion. You think one day X will make you happy, you get it, and when you get it, you realize it's nothing. And that's what exactly a mirage is. A mirage is an illusion that disappears when you arrive at it, which is amazing description. Anyway, and then God gives you your due reward, as it were, due punishment, let's say, as a natural result of chasing something meaningless. Doesn't mean you shouldn't have physical things to sustain you and keep you alive. Okay, that's kind of going to an extreme. But anyway, what is my point? I'll make a statement and then we could try to break it down a little bit. No solutions will fix anything until the heart of the problem, which is consumer addiction, the result of godless emptiness, long sentence, is filled with a comprehensive social and spiritual lifestyle of Islam. So, what am I saying here? You got consumer addiction, if we're buying stuff we don't need, and we definitely are, there's a lot of what I would describe as a lot of people generally would describe as Western illnesses. Obesity is one, diabetes is another, from over consuming. We really need very little to. We're actually much healthier when we eat less. Like, for example, fasting is incredibly healthy for you, right? So all these kind of things, and so we've got consumer addiction, and it comes from is a result of godless emptiness. And I'll ask you a question about this in a second, I suppose. Godless emptiness. So the stuff we need is meaning, and meaning really falls apart without God. That's there's a lot of stuff thrown in there to talk about, I suppose, but it's not that complicated actually. Any thoughts about this sense of consumerism is a result of godless emptiness? Any thoughts about it? Feel free to disagree, whatever you want.
Very interesting. I mean, something's missing. I think, which is why we have excessive consumerism. I think. Yeah, I mean, you could call it God or whatever you want, but yeah, there's some. I think there's the people lack a really in the West. This is, of course, from my experience growing up in London. There's really a lack of a higher mission, if that makes sense. Like, I mean, by higher mission I mean something like
a purpose, a direction.
No, people have direction, but there's something like direction beyond sort of maintaining a comfortable lifestyle.
Yes, and exactly, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And this is what Viktor Frankl talks about meaning. Okay, and we're going to talk about it more when we talk about passion and living the life of passion, with meaning is central to it. Yeah, so in short, because I did say it's simple, but there's always there's always a way to debate it if you want to, but the thing is, if there's no God, then everything is random. And if everything is random, there is no meaning, because there's just random. There's just no meaning. You cannot create meaning even if you want to create meaning, you cannot create meaning if it doesn't exist, because it's random. And therefore, that's why you need a God for there to be meaning. And this is not me making this up. There's a whole understanding by atheists called nihilism, which means there's no meaning. Okay, and that's really unhealthy. If you understand how human beings function, the mechanics of the human soul, as it were, if you had to describe it, you need meaning. And if you have no meaning, you're in big trouble.
Yeah, I mean, there is sort of like, for example, some religions. I don't know if you're familiar with like Nagarjuna, that philosopher in like the University of Nalanda. He taught there, I think. But there's sort of it's not the same as nihilism, but they say like emptiness. They believe like all things are empty. If that makes sense. But it's not the same as saying, oh, it's everything, nothing really exists. But it says like okay, I mean, it's not. I can't really get into all the details because we're trying to keep this kind of short. Is this microphone okay?
Oh yeah, no, I was making sure it was on, and I was worried I was going to drop it in your tea, and all sorts of things like that. Very unprofessional. Just remember, very, very unprofessional. Let's carry on.
Yeah, and the idea of emptiness. I mean, there's more to it than this, but I'm trying to keep it short. But the idea is there's like certain things we do, who we are, we kind of impute meaning onto them, like.
Yeah, I think there's.
Does that make sense? Like it is.
I think it's a desperate attempt to create meaning when there is no meaning, if there's no God. And so the people, I like the nihilists in the sense that they're just black and white honest with reality of their choices.
No, I think emptiness is different to that. It's different to that. It's not like it's not saying nothing really exists, but it's.
I mean, nihilism is not saying nothing exists. They're saying they exist but has no purpose because it wasn't planned.
Okay. No, I think emptiness is kind of like, it's more to do with like your consciousness. If that makes sense. Like it's like if I say a certain thing to someone, it's sort of I impute
In an
whether-
attempt to actually get more views, and I told you about this, the longer the video is, less people watch it. So I'm going to end that bit of the interesting discussion and whiz through. I'm a liar, I think, because I just can't whiz through this stuff fast enough. But in short, really we can see in society, macro level, statistically, as even though we're getting more stuff, we're getting more depressed in the West, especially. Depression levels are going up. If you believe statistics, which I hope you do, it's called science. And so some of the richest countries are the most depressed. Yeah, and so let me just quickly explain this whole thing about this comprehensive social and spiritual lifestyle of Islam. So spiritual, another way of saying it is living a meaningful life. That's what spiritual is. It really is no different to that, right? But I think part of that spiritual lifestyle should be a social lifestyle, because we are social beings. And I think why I talk about Islam rather than Christianity or Buddhism or Judaism, okay, if there was a second best, I would call it Judaism, because it's the most integrated system where you should be doing this, you should be doing that. Islam, socialize 5 times a day at least. Be friends with the neighbors is incredibly important. There's a saying of Prophet Muhammad that says, if your neighbors say you're bad, you're bad. If your neighbors say you're good, you're good. It gives incredible importance to neighbors, right? And that, if you can't socialize with your neighbors, that's the beginning of the end in terms of loneliness and everything, right? So stuff like that, right? And so that's why I think that's really important to fix.
Do you think do you not think there's any benefit in kind of living a reclusive lifestyle?
I think there's some. Okay, so if I strictly stick on this idea of meaning. Okay, meaning means being of service, practically. So, spending a little bit of time to yourself. One of my favorite things to do in the morning, the first thing I wake up is pray by myself. Even though Muslims pray together, but there's a prayer before that called the tahajjud, right? One of my favorite things, very important in Islam. Prophet Muhammad used to do a lot of it as well. But that's only a part of it, but by itself is really unhealthy. Really unhealthy in 2 ways. We are social beings. If you're by yourself, loneliness is the biggest killer. So if you have a 100% reclusive lifestyle, you probably kill yourself. Practically, it will happen, just because we're social beings. And in terms of meaning, also you'll kill yourself. Just to make it really short, because you won't have any meaning. Because meaning is being an active participant in society in a positive way. Does that help in any way?
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Anyway, next one, more controversial, fighting nature in women. So generally fighting nature is not a good idea if you're talking about environmentalism, okay? And we tend to fight nature in lots of ways, you know. But to be very specific, I'm talking about gender roles. I don't even like the word gender. I'm talking about sex roles because gender is a made-up word. But anyway, so I'll quickly quote the verse of the Holy Quran, which again is controversial to a lot of people in the Western mindset. It says, men are guardians over women because Allah, that is God, has made some of them excel others, and because they, men, spend of their wealth. So virtuous women are those who are obedient and guard the secrets of their husband with Allah's protection. So in short, it's saying men are the leaders of the household because they're better at being leaders. And good women are obedient. Okay, now that sounds, in a Western mindset, that sounds really but in loads of Muslim women, so mostly it's just to give a statistic, besides Islam being the fastest growing religion in the West, not just through families but converts, both things are good, it's mainly women that are converting, Western women are converting, because they value this mindset of having a functional family, just like a functional functional company, and a functional company has one leader, not 10 leaders going in 10 different directions. And it's not like a horrible leader, because a horrible leader doesn't work. Nobody wants to be in that team. Nobody wants to be in that company. Nobody will stay in that relationship. Okay, and Islam is a very kind, family-oriented, women-orientated. And I could go into it, but I'm trying to keep it short, right? Religion. And so I'm going to jump into what my point is in terms of environment. Here goes the statement. It goes like this. Denying the ultimate truth of God's existence opens up us to denial of a more obvious truth. So once you become a liar, and I think denying God's existence, I don't like saying horrible words, but in a way you're being a liar. You're denying some really fundamental truths of existence, then you become more open to just denying more other obvious truths, which is men and women are completely different. Okay, this is a big problem nowadays because people struggle with even that idea. Okay, and now once you realize that what this denial of that basic truth has pushed women to be cheap, and when I say cheap, I mean both in sexualized and low value parts of industry. Okay, people say, women there's a pay gap. That's because they are not industrialists by nature, and this is based in psychology. We can check these out. I think I put loads of links for videos for that, right? But the fundamental difference, the most clear difference between men and women, is that men are interested in things, women are interested in people, which is actually a good thing to say about women, right? I would hate to live in a world where we're just men because we're more mechanical. But we have a function, being more mechanical and more methodical. We like that. And it results in us being more industrial. Okay, and being more industrial just makes you better money maker, but that's not the fundamental way that I value people, and I hope nobody really values people. I mean, when I say I hope, in a materialistic society, unfortunately, we do value people like that, and that's why people struggle with this idea of having women taking care of the home, because it's like seen beneath them because they're not making money. But I don't value that. I don't value things like that. I value things like, you're taking care of the most important part of everything, the family, the home. Without that, all the money making is completely pointless. You know what I mean? Yeah? So, let me just finish off the statement, this really long statement. I talk a lot. Anyway, let's just try to whiz through this. So, they're parts of industry rather than the hearts of families, because you can't really be both. And the reality is that I see that all the time. I don't know how I see that all the time, but I'm a private tutor. I know a lot of different families, let's say. And so, too tired to cook. Okay, now hopefully you'll see where this is going, which started the fake food industry of fast and frozen food. So this started mainly in the 1950s. Okay, I don't want to say the whole history of that because it'll be too long as well. But basically, they got encouraged to be more part of industry than the home, and the statistics continue that cooking at the home is incredibly rare, and which encourages fast food and frozen food, and which I call fake food. Okay, which industrialized food. There's a whole process, and I've linked a video. The video I linked, by the way, is a person who was not making this point. He was just giving the history of what happened and where the industrialization of food started, and he points this out. But he didn't want to make the point I'm making, which is women should be cooking at home. And so, which industrialized food poisoned animals, poisoned the earth, killed bees with monoculture. This is all like an extension of industrializing food. Okay, caused desertification. When you do monoculture, kill the earth with all the chemicals, you're causing more deserts, which makes it harder to sustain human life. forced overproduction, so there's way more production than we need to, which caused overconsumption, which has caused so many illnesses, including cancer, by the way. Okay, all of which are the biggest cause of environmental damage. If we put all of these together, they are by far the biggest cause of environmental damage. I'm trying to talk fast, it doesn't really help. So in short, women cooking at home, these very seemingly unimportant things, but if you tip the balance of nature, if you don't really realize the importance of the subtleties in nature, then we cause huge domino effects. And I think that's a really good metaphor, because you've seen the small domino hits the bigger domino, and then you have massive results. I'm talking too much. Any thoughts?
No. I mean, I some thoughts, but I'm trying to wrap things up. So
Cool.
yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll leave it at that. That's fine. Just in terms of a little bit of thoughts, do you find it really uncomfortable that I'm suggesting women should cook at home?
I mean, no, I wouldn't say uncomfortable, but I do like cooking as well. I've kind of got into that recently.
Sure. I think there is scope for allowing men to cook at home as well.
Yes, I mean, yeah.
Cool. I think I agree with your general sentiment of trying to keep it short. I get it.
Yeah.
And you generally agree that there might be some disagreements.
I mean, I think I think it is good that women are doing certain things, though. I mean, like I think like Jacinda Ardern is like quite good for New Zealand.
Yeah, I think a man could do it much better, generally speaking, because men are generally good at seeing things in a macro and a systematic way. But also, I do value the different functions. I call it specialization, and looking deeply at the biology of human beings and how they function, all this kind of stuff. But as you say, let's move on. That's cool. Okay, and the last bit is the title of the last bit is "We're in God's Hands." It's kind of I'm not sure if it's called a pun or something, but instead of good hands, we're in God's hands. Okay, let me explain that. I'll start with the verse of the Holy Quran really quickly. And he created horses and mules and asses, different kinds of donkeys, I believe, that you may ride them as a source of beauty. And he'll create what you do not yet know. So, if you're wondering what that's all about, basically it's the idea that the environment is not an accident. It's a cradle in which we live that's designed. Okay, and whatever's being created is not the end of the creations that will help us sustain life for ourselves and whatever on Earth. In short, we're being taken care of. Okay, and let me make the statement that covers everything. Earth and all its life support systems demonstrate it is under careful control, and we will be assisted through every difficulty, so we don't need to panic. Just keep using the tech we do have, like the internet, to reduce transport, and keep working on more tech, which will come just in time. If it isn't already with us, that's another debate, okay? Like oil did with the combustion engine. So a lot of things happen. We might think they're coincidence. I don't think so. Like oil, the finding of oil and combustion engines, it all happened pretty much roughly the same time. Any thoughts?
Sorry, could you repeat the last bit?
Okay, so the general idea was if you look at nature and all the incredible life support system, I'm talking about the clouds and everything, we're really being taken care of, but it's easy to not value it because it's easy to ignore things.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think in some ways, I think from what I understand, like paganism was the idea of worshipping a nature. And in some ways, when we moved away from that, I think it was the beginning of the environmental collapse in a sense, because, like, for example, indigenous cultures, for example, in Australia, and America, Canada, New Zealand, so forth. Like they had quite simple homes, like with like teepees and the like. But then the reason was because they lived like that was because it did the least amount of damage to the environment. And nowadays, we have these big buildings and stuff, which we have to like destroy all this, forest land and green land to build all these these tall skyscrapers and blocks of flats and things. But yeah, I think they're really. It's interesting. Like if you think about it, like as human beings, like this planet really doesn't need us.
I think that's a bit. I think. Okay. Do you think the planet needs bees?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Do you think we're part of nature?
We are part of nature, but the thing is though, like if every let's just say if every human being died tomorrow, would life on Earth just
I think it would collapse for the same reason why we claim. So I think we're sometimes harsh because there's some ideas that are circulating. We're sometimes overly harsh on human beings as well. Okay, but we forget that we're part of nature, and we accept that nature is not. I mean, people might not realize, but nature is an intricate, interrelated system, which all the parts are very important. Okay, now somehow we're surviving without the woolly mammoths. It didn't all collapse, whatever. So maybe it's a bit more complicated than we realize. But in the same token, by which if a grasshopper stopped existing, we'd be worried for the same reason that human beings might stop existing. But I get that we're pretty destructive as well, which grasshoppers don't really have a choice. They do their function. We're more liberal. We've got more options.
That's the really at the heart of this. It's excessive, I think, liberalism, especially in the West.
Yeah.
Especially in the West, they're very excessive liberalism.
Yeah. And that goes back to. Oh, go on. Because I do all the talking. I'll give you a chance when you do.
I mean, it's getting kind of long, so I'll just leave it at that.
Cool. So, just to. I suppose there was something I wanted to say, but. Yeah. Yeah, so this. Yeah, I'll kind of leave it at that there, really, basically. So, thank you very much for taking part. We're going to do another video. Thank you.